Does the panel agree the British people have lost pride in their nation and national identity?
I don't think British people have, writ large. I don't believe that. But I do think we've had a succession of governments that I'm afraid have not been willing to stand up for the national interest. And you can look at the polling. You know, a plurality now of Gen Zers say that they would question whether they would fight for this country. You look at the relentless attacks on the legacy of Sir Winston Churchill, I think the greatest Briton ever to have lived. We're seeing this time and time again. You look at what is being taught to our children in schools. You look at even the Church of England talking about paying reparations when it was the West Africa Squadron, it was the British West Africa Squadron. It was Britain that abolished slavery. It was the first major power in the world to abolish slavery and then dispatched the West Africa Squadron. We are the mightiest navy in the world at that time to go and uphold and enforce that law and freed hundreds of thousands of slaves at enormous cost in terms of treasure and blood in terms of our navy. That's something we should be incredibly proud of as a country. How many of our children in schools as we speak are being taught about that? And yet all of the conversation invariably is about reparations, about how Britain should be ashamed of its history. Of course, Britain does not have a perfect history. No country does. But I would argue Britain has the richest history, a history that we should be incredibly proud of. And we're simply not seeing that delivered in the form of a national curriculum. That's something Reform is looking at to make sure that it is. And in the form of just how people are made to feel about this country. Let's take the last point I want to make on this is let's look at what's happened with the Chago silence. This relentless obsession from Keir Starmer, and by the way, it was the Tories who did 5 rounds of negotiations on this to begin with, to hand over, to cede sovereign territory in the form of the Chago silence and then spend billions of pounds of your money to then lease it back over the decades to come. Absolutely nothing about that that's remotely acceptable. We need a British government that will stand up for the British interests.
I don't know if you're aware, and I don't know if this changes your opinion, that Donald Trump has said this evening he thinks that was probably the best deal that Keir Starmer could get.
He did say that. I read the Truth Social post that President Trump posted. I disagree with the notion that he has, quote, endorsed the deal. But what I will say is, to the degree that he has done that, it has clearly come as a result of Keir Starmer expending enormous diplomatic capital in this country. For what? To gain sovereign territory? No, to cede sovereign territory and then lease it back at the cost of tens of billions of pounds over the coming decades.
Munir, do you want to respond? The woman here in red was talking about the first 4 points on your manifesto, I think you were saying.
Yeah.
About divisiveness generally.
The first 4 points in our manifesto are indeed, or on our policy website at the moment, are indeed about immigration. Immigration is the #1 salience issue for the British public as we speak, according to the latest YouGov polling. The British public voted for less immigration in 4 consecutive general elections, and clearly the Brexit referendum result was in no small part because they wanted less immigration. And what did the British people get instead? They got 12 million people gross who were shipped into the country under the Tory government, 6.5 million people net. They got 400 net new prison places at the end of that period and fewer hospital beds. That is why we have a country where our public services are on the brink of collapse, why people feel that our culture is being eroded. So I totally respect why you might feel concerned about those things, but that is precisely why Reform is leading by 10 points in the average of the polls right now. We make no apology for saying we need secure borders, #1. We need to stop the boats from coming, the real-time invasion of this country. We must also deport illegal migrants who are in this country already, and we need law and order. That is the case we're making to the British people, and we'll see what happens in the general election.